I wake up and I'm filled with anxiety, thinking about what I did the night before. Pretty typical. Just drink a couple beers, it'll go away. And then I hear a boom, boom, boom at my door, and it was his friend, and he came in, and he walked in, and he put a gun to my head and told me to give me all his stuff back. And I just stared at him, and the crazy thing is, this is when I knew that I had crossed this invisible threshold that between being like a normal drinker or like even like a hard drinker to this real alcoholic. Because one of the things he asked for was his bottle of alcohol back. And it was right in the other room in a backpack, and I had a gun to my head. And I had more fear of not having that alcohol than I did to that gun to my head. My earliest like memories in my family is probably I imagine pretty traumatic for other people. You know, my earliest memory was like being on the front steps of my house that I lived in on Selma Street in Alabama, and my mom like on the ground and my dad kind of standing over her, and my first instinct is to like hover over my mom. I'm in kindergarten, right? I remember yelling at my dad, and then we got up and we went across the street to my grandma's house, and then we lived in Breckenridge, Minnesota, right? Like we left my dad, and then it was probably just only a few weeks later, and then my dad was back, right? Moved in with us. And that was kind of the cycle of my mom's marriage with my dad was like he would get to this point and then we would leave and then he'd come back 2 weeks later. And it was always around drinking. So there was like, never saw my mom drinking or doing drugs growing up. She was too busy taking care of me and my brother and my dad. And my dad would come around for a couple months and he'd be sober, for a couple months. And then, just all of a sudden, he'd be drinking, and then it was off to the races again for him. And the crazy thing about like my family is that like we're like really stoic, or we're like off the rails. But there's like a brief little period in there, like 1-2 days, where like there's like a little bit of controlling of the drinking, and it seems like they're like the most amazing people in the world in that period, of like drink the first 3 beers, right? And I've always like thought to myself that if I could just be at that margin, I wouldn't be here. I'd probably be happy, like when I was using. What I'm saying is if I could have controlled and enjoyed my drinking, I would, the life I'm living today never would have existed. And so thankfully, now I look back at it, and I'm grateful that I was a raging alcoholic and committed a bunch of felonies and ended up in institutions and detox. And at the time, I hated it. I hated it with everything in it. I hated me. I hated that I couldn't drink. I hated that I couldn't be normal. And now I look back at it and realize that I think I would have wasted my life if I could have controlled my drinking. The depravity of alcoholism and addiction and all the collateral consequences that came along with that life has, which was looked as failure at one time, was actually what drove the success later when I got sober. And so, fast forward, I hated my dad for a long time, and this is a kid, in junior high that was a quarterback. I was really good at sports. Not so good in typical, run-of-the-mill memorization kind of school. Did not have a good memory, but graded well on group activities and captain of football team, stuff that had leadership, but you weren't graded on that kind of stuff. Entrepreneurs weren't, there's not a test for that in school. So I did not do well in school. But I was just a white kid that was in, rural America that, didn't do well in school, but did great at sports and didn't really get in a lot of trouble. And then later, I turned into the guy that I hated growing up, that I thought caused so much, damage in my family. And it's weird to think that now I look at my dad. He's passed on. He's not alive anymore. Died of alcoholism, liver cancer. Now I look at him, and there was like a little brief time of pity because of the hand he was dealt. Some of the things that happened to him when he was a kid that he never really shared with other people. And then it kind of turned into that an understanding why my dad was the way he was. And it wasn't our fault. It wasn't my mom's fault. It wasn't because she was like a chopper wife, right? Like hovering over, because she wasn't. She was just trying to be a good mom and a good wife, and he cheated on her and he lied to her and he drank all the time, and and it was really easy for us to judge him for that because we didn't have that experience. We were like the victims of it. And then he left, and my mom didn't have anyone to take care of anymore, and she kind of became bitter, and she turned to drugs and she turned to alcohol. And you could make the argument that she was doing the same things that she judged him for, right? But it's different. It's kind of like when a wife, or a girlfriend leaves you because of your drinking and your lack of support, and then finds another guy that's just like that, but it's different. You know what I mean? It's not. And I've realized that, anytime I feel like I have an opinion or I have a judgment, I just have to wait another year, and then it will change because of experience. So basically, I learned to love my dad, even in what I viewed as failure at the time. And so I became that guy. I was drinking, 18, 19 years old, drinking every day, getting kicked out of, establishments, catching felonies, breaking into cars, and I used to justify it as like, I'm just an adrenaline junkie when I drink. And really, I had no care for anybody. I was super selfish, egotistical, didn't have any problems. And if everyone else would just relax and just back off a little bit, it'll just kind of play itself out, and I'll just be normal. And I was pretty much locked up from the time I was 18 in this revolving door of institutions and jails, treatment centers, detox, homeless shelters, until I was 31. And then I was squatting in this apartment. Been to AA, been to NA, been to Smart Recovery, tried Celebrate Recovery, tried a variety of churches, tried, white knuckling it, tried, if I just had the right girl, if I would just be a better dad, if I just be more present, if I tried different ways of drinking, if I take trazodone, like 1,000 milligrams of trazodone before I drink, I'll only drink a little bit and then I'll just go to sleep, right? Like I tried every imaginable remedy of like trying to control and enjoy my drinking, that it just utterly failed, because I just eventually, this craving inside me would just unleash, and I couldn't control it, and I didn't want to, because when I controlled it, I didn't have fun, and when I had fun, I definitely was not controlling it, and so I was just kind of this, I don't even know what you call it, just like this twilight zone of I couldn't imagine living sober, and I couldn't imagine not, being drunk, right? And so I thought about suicide more times sober than I ever did drinking, and I think that for a long time drinking prevented me from committing suicide, because it provided just a little bit of relief for me. And so for me, what happened was, when I was 31, I was squatting in this apartment. I just got fired from my job doing sales for this tech company, and hadn't showered in. There was no reason not to shower. I just didn't. Like I just lost all just the want to do anything, So I wasn't showering. I didn't remember the last time I put deodorant on. I used to say I looked, homeless because I had a beard, but then After a while, I grew a beard. But it was just like patchy and I stunk. I'd go to work, before I got fired, and people would be like, "Who farted?" Right? And I knew it was because I smelled like shit. And I would just like, just to humor people, I'd just be like, "Oh, I did it," and just stealing the alcohol out of the cabinets there. I hadn't seen my kids in forever. And if I even engaged with their moms on Facebook, they'd block me. And that was like the only way I could see my kids was pictures of them with other people. And so I was kind of like, I was super lonely. But there was always this like little bit of hope because I had gone to 12-step meetings. And there was stories there of people who were impossible. Like they were like when I heard their stories, I was like, there's no way that guy should be sober. And they always stuck with me in the back of my head. Even when I was drinking, I would talk about 12-step groups, right? Because I had got a little bit of like recovery, a few years back where I like stayed sober for like 6-7 months. Just these little brief periods. And it was funny because I'd be out like drinking, wishing I was with those guys. Right? Or if I was at the bar drinking with someone who like somehow indicated that they had alcoholism, I would like 12-step them, right? Like at the bar stool while I'm drinking. And so I really longed and had this like fantasy of like being sober. I just didn't think it was ever going to happen because something always happened. Something always triggered me back. And, today looking back at it is I just wasn't willing to go through the pain. I wasn't willing to go through the struggle. I wasn't willing to put in the work to stay sober. I was willing, hundreds, take a lie detector test and be like, I'm gonna get sober. I'm gonna stay sober. And I bet you I could have done that every day for the last 10 years, and it would have said I was telling the truth because I meant it. I had this desire to want to be sober. I just wasn't willing to put in the work, the hard work, right? The really painful work of, when I want to drink, actually calling someone. And being honest with them that I'm thinking about drinking, or going through the feelings in my gut where it feels like butterflies driving race cars when I think about drinking, right? I was just really feelings like driven, and so if I felt it, I just did it, right? If I felt like drinking, it just felt like really overwhelming, and I just do it and just fantasize about what it was like to take that first drink. And it always did every single time. It was even better than what I was thinking. And it always stuck in the back of my head. If I want to feel good right now, I just got to drink. So when I was 31, I was squatting in this apartment. I hadn't showered and shaved in a long time. And it wasn't like normal for me to not shave. I wore suits to work, and I had never dry cleaned them. They smelled. I had a whole room dedicated to garbage. I was scared to take beer cans and bottles outside of people judging me, but then I'd get drunk and I'd just like whip them off my balcony because it just felt like I was 10 feet tall and bulletproof and untouchable. And there's nothing in the world that made me feel that way. And so I was drinking with my last friend. I walked all the way from my house all the way over to his place over in Moorhead, it was probably about a 2.5-hour walk. And with the intentions of that he had alcohol. And I had no money, no alcohol, got fired, was being evicted from this apartment I was squatting in, and had 3 days to leave the property, and just couldn't see my kids, and had no car, no license, and knew I was about to be homeless again. And so I just needed a little bit of relief, and alcohol always did that. So I walked to his house and went to his house, and we were drinking and having fun, and then he passed out, and then I robbed him. And took all the alcohol, and I tried to take money out of his bank account, and just do the things that I did when I was drinking. And he was literally like my last friend. And I went back. I walked all the way back home, which was like a much easier walk after you've been drinking, and get in the house. And then the next day, I wake up and I'm filled with anxiety, thinking about what I did the night before. Pretty typical. Just drink a couple beers, it'll go away. And then I hear a boom, boom, boom at my door, and it was his friend, and he came in, and he walked in, and he put a gun to my head and told me to give me all his stuff back, right? And I just stared at him, and the crazy thing is, this is when I knew that I had crossed this invisible threshold that between being like a normal drinker or like even like a hard drinker to this real alcoholic. Because one of the things he asked for was his bottle of alcohol back. And it was right in the other room in a backpack, and I had a gun to my head. And I had more fear of not having that alcohol than I did to that gun to my head. And I didn't tell him where it was at, and I told him it was gone. And he just stared at me, and then he put the gun back in his pocket, and then he walked out. And it was just like a moment of clarity that I was willing to die over a bottle, like the bottle, right? And the crazy thing is I didn't even drink it. I went and got help. And I walked down the street to this payphone that was outside, which is weird to tell people because they don't know what payphones are. And it's not there now. It was actually gone a month later, right? And so like my whole recovery is like seconds and inches. Like if I would have waited like 1 month longer and I walked by that place and that phone wouldn't be there, would I be here, right? If I wouldn't have called Andre and walked 2.5 hours, which was kind of symbolic that the last walk I did for alcohol was 2.5. My first walk for recovery was 2.5. If Andre wouldn't have answered his phone, would I be here, right? Like there's just all these scenarios that played in my head of like how close like everything worked together to be the perfect storm for me to be in recovery. And then I think about it, every single time was like that. Every time I wanted to get sober, the perfect storm was there. Why was this different? And that's a question I get asked. So every time I speak, some mom will come up to me and they're like, what was it? They want to reproduce it for their kid. I don't know. I knew that when I called and asked that guy for help, that if he answered, he would have said yes. That's the difference. I had people in my corner that no matter how many times I relapsed or how many times I took advantage of people or how many felonies I got, whatever, they were always there whenever I called, as long as I was willing. And every time I called, I'd say, hey, I need help. And they said they were on their way. And then as soon as I wasn't doing the things that I needed to do, they just stopped helping me, you know? They continued to talk to me, but they wouldn't go out of their way to make sure I had rides to work or, you know, or a couch to sleep on or whatever if I wasn't willing to put in the work, right? And so I asked Andre if I could go to his house, and, you know, the thing in AA is that you could be 10 years sober and still not have a license because they took it from you, you know, like, and so he didn't have a car, so he couldn't come get me, but he told me to walk. And that was like my first test was like, I could have just went across the street to the bar or walked 2.5 hours to Andre's house. And I, you know, the first time ever in my life, I chose to walk. And I feel like even 10 years later now, sober, I'm still making that walk, right? There's like, you know, tons of things that I could do to just the easy way out of not having to be honest or, you know, covering this up or this you know, acting inappropriately, whatever, right? And there's been plenty of opportunities, but that is part of like my recovery is that I have to act accordingly. And every time that I choose to, you know, go back to the old way of thinking or that old mindset, it's like one step closer. So Andre introduced me to a bunch of people in recovery. I got connected. I started attending 12-step groups. My first year of recovery was probably my favorite. Everything was new. Everything felt great. Everybody accepted me. And the crazy, you know, story, and then I'll kind of, we can get, you know, do other stuff, but questions. But one of the last things I did in this home group was one of the guys that goes to this home group owned an excavating company, right? And he always hired dudes from our group that were, you know, just getting sober, needing a job, put them in a dozer, and then just start moving dirt. And they had just kind of had this kind of cool recovery culture where everyone was like sober working at this company. So it was like perfect for new guys if they were willing to, you know, show up and put in the work. And when I was working there, I screwed up on a job. I don't even remember what it was, but it really pissed off the owner. And he told me to take the day off. And it humiliated me because he did it right in front of everybody, right? And I got, you know, I was at a place where I just didn't handle resentments well. I didn't handle anger well. I was very toxic. I was newly sober. And I went home, and I had just got my, my license back. This is before I got like really sober. This is, and so the history with this guy is that I went out and got drunk that day and just got annihilated and went and stole a U-Haul. And then I started breaking into businesses, and one of the businesses that I robbed was this company where all my home group buddies work at. And I back the U-Haul up to it. I break through, I get into the warehouse or the garage, go through the bathroom drywall and kick it down, and then just take everything out of that office. I throw in the back of this U-Haul, and I just start driving, and then I hit another place, and then another place, and then I ended up in another city, and I woke up. And before I even opened my eyes, man, I could smell the cigarette butts and the stale, the beer, and I could smell that I was in a stale, like, hotel room, and I knew that I had did it again. I just didn't know what gravity, right? And when I opened my eyes and I saw, like, these, the logos of this company on these laptops and stuff, I realized that I just robbed my friends that are in recovery, right? So now I've, like, not only created damages with my family and employers and stuff. Now I've literally did it to the people who were like helping me. And so for for years, I didn't go back to that meeting because I had robbed, the owner of that company, and a bunch of the guys there work there. And I was like super fearful. And when I got sober, Andre, that was his home group, and he told me that if I wanted to be sober and I wanted to stay on his couch, then I'd have to be willing to go to that group. And I was like, I remember my ego came back real quick and was like, I could probably find something else, right? And he knew the history, and he didn't care. Like, he was willing. He was like, if you want to work, if you're gonna put in the work, you got to put it in. And I remember the first time I went to that meeting. And I'm telling you, seconds and inches, bro. Like, they could have said anything to, like, humiliate me because of my past, and I would have left. I would have walked right out that door. I probably would have knocked one of them out, even though I know it was all my fault. I just wasn't willing to endure the feelings associated with my actions yet. And so they flanked me, man. This is a large meeting. It was like 200 people that go to this meeting. It was like a young person's meeting. And there's like, and I know exactly where all the guys who work at that company are, because they're all wearing their green vest, right? And so I see them, and I'm like doing like this weird Rob Zombie kind of mosh pit thing where I'm like going in the circle and kind of, and then they like flanked me. And, Jeff came walking up to me, and we just kind of like stared at each other. He's much taller than me. And we just kind of stared at each other. And then he just put his arms open, and he grabbed me, and he brought me in. And he was just like, I'm just happy that you're sober. Don't worry about what you did. Just be safe here tonight. I've already talked to the other guys. Nobody's going to say anything to you. And then, my kid's mom also goes to that meeting. And she was there, and I had burned things down with her. And then she came up to me and started crying and holding me, and told me that she was glad to see, that I was back. And then one of the guys that was working at that company came up to me, and he was like, I just want you to know that I wanted to punch you when I saw you, but I'm sponsored. And my sponsor told me to come over here and give you a hug. And I gave you a hug, and now I feel better, and I don't want to punch you. And I'm just glad you're here. And they could have said anything within rights, could have humiliated me or whatever, right? And I still had like warrants out for this, and went and turned myself in. So anyways, fast forward, they made it very comfortable for me when I did finally, like, everything came together. And I've been trying to, and I think that's been the piece that was missing, is I never had a real connection. And it wasn't until that destruction and that forgiveness and that grace that I didn't feel, it wasn't until that happened and when I felt that connection and created this weird enthusiastic desire, right, to do anything, to stay sober. And so, after that, everything just kind of like fell together, right? It was like super easy. All those things that were really hard for me were easy because I had a different mindset, and I wanted to be sober, and I wanted to get reconciled with my kids, and I wanted to work, at a job, and And, month by month, everything just got, awesome really fast. Guys gave me rides to work my first 6 months, and the day they couldn't do it anymore, I got my license in a car. I got a sales job, and they put me on a performance-based commission, and I just killed it and made more money for that company in my first year than all the other sales reps did in their first year combined. And I just fell in love with like life. And early on, my first 18 months of recovery, I was asked to do a psych ward meeting, and I went to that meeting every week for 18 months, and no one stayed sober. And I kind of had this weird like Bill Wilson moment where, in the first 6 months that Bill Wilson was like working with people and letting them stay on his couch and sponsoring people and stuff, nobody stayed sober that first 6 months. And then he was complaining about it to his wife, and his wife, Lois, he's like, nobody's staying sober. And then Lois said to him, which probably saved an entire organization of people. She was like, but you are. And that like, it was the same experience for me in my first 18 months in that psych ward. Nobody came out of there, and I was ready to give up. And then Danny came through, and then he's still sober to this day. And this would have been just, over a little over 9 years ago, so it's like every time I'm like ready to give up or just not be as active or change the way that I do things, whatever, some little moment happens where it's just like a reminder of like why I do what I do. So at that company for 4 years, they treated me really good. They didn't treat me like a token felon. When they started to have drinks and stuff, they kind of got weird and would like make, jokes or whatever, but I ate it up. I liked being different. I kind of enjoyed having the center of attention just because of who I was and stuff. And it kind of gave me a leg up on other people because they were like, it was like an underdog story, and I just seized it. So I was there for like 4 years, and then this nonprofit came to me and asked me if they had heard I was homeless once, and they wanted me to tell, my story at this event. And really what they were doing is they wanted me to tell my story so that they could benefit off of it, but I had never benefited from any services from any nonprofit in Fargo. And they raised a bunch of money, and I got put in the front, page of the paper, and it was kind of cool. I turned my phone off before I went on stage, and then I got off, and like all these text messages are coming through of that was awesome, this is cool, you're amazing, which was, it was all cool. And then I got a bunch of messages from people saying I need help, and my son's in prison, or my daughter's using meth, or whatever. And I realized, like, looking back at it now, that it had put a face to addiction and incarceration, and which there never had been one in Fargo before. And so I just started answering these, like, I just felt like I was called to do it, right? Like, there was kind of this flicker to want to do more with, like, helping people in the community, like this flicker in my heart, right? And then when I got off stage and I started getting those emails, it kind of fanned a flame, and it was just like I had found my purpose. And went to my job and told them, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to do something, and it's not going to be here, and it's going to be serving people in the community, and I'll give you 1 year notice or whatever. And it lasted 30 days and started going into the jails and the prisons. I didn't even have a name for whatever we were doing yet. No business plan, no nonprofit tax ID. I just went out. I was just like, man, I'm just going to go out there and just help people, and whatever is in front of me, then it is. And I'm going to be super underpaid, and I'm going to overwork myself. And that was the plan. Like, there was just like, just work, just do stuff, and have no expectations. And whatever happens, happens. And, slowly but surely things just, we became a nonprofit, we became an F5 project, people wanted to donate to us, and then next thing I know, the state governments are approaching us saying, we want to pay you for what you're already doing. Here's a new program. And then we just like went from 0 to 60 people in like 5 years, like working at F5. And we still don't have a business plan. Like, we're just, we probably will one day, but the whole idea is to help people navigate employment, housing, and recovery. Those are the 3 areas that we found are the most crucial with reentry, or recovery, or any of those things. Those three areas, no matter who you are the basics. And the idea was like if kind of like the name F5 is like, people are going to screw up. They're not going to act the way we think they should act. They're probably ADHD. They probably have mental health diagnoses. Like, there's such a wide variety of people, but they all need housing. They all need employment. They all need recovery. And as long as they keep showing up, we'll just keep giving them unlimited chances. But they had to show up. And so that's kind of the F5, motto, if you will. Is it like the double entendre of, like, I had 5 felonies on my background when I started it, and the F5 key on the keyboard was like, if you write up a Word doc, and until Office 365 came out, but if you write up a Word doc and then you hit F5 and you didn't save the Word doc, it just erases it. So the idea is like, what would it look like no matter how many times somebody comes to us, that we treat them like that first time, like that customer service kind of, for-profit mind with a nonprofit heart. And it's just been growing like wildfire because we led it with peer support, like people who had been in their shoes, people in recovery, people with, trauma, people with, even women have started working there that specialize on what it's like to be afflicted by someone's incarceration or their addiction, and they're helping moms. And we started mom groups and relapse prevention and reentry groups, and we started a treatment center. And it's just like, man, when you lead with your heart and you have that lived experience, it just became to a point where like anything's possible. Like, just throw stuff at the board, and if you want to do it, that's kind of our thing with staff. If you want to create something, we'll get behind you. You got to put in the legwork. You got to put in the effort. You got to research it. You got to start it. You got to launch it. But you got to be doing your full-time job at the same time. And if it works out, we'll fund it. And that's how we started youth programs, because someone on our staff started it, and it got some legs. That's how we started the men's housing. That's how we started doing the recovery services. Like, all that stuff was started by someone on staff. And once they got the momentum, we funded it, and then it created its own funding mechanism. So that's F5 in the Ridge Treatment Center. And, the reason behind it, was, I was making really good money at the tech field, way more than I'm making now. And none of my friends were leveling up. Maybe they had bigger barriers, I don't know. And then, the people who were like leveled up financially were like really not my friends. And I didn't really know them, and they just seemed different, and it just felt like I was making rich people richer. And I got nothing against it. I want to be rich, like I'm not dumb, It's like money creates security for sure. But a lot of my friends were going to prison and dying, and there was nobody helping them. And they were left to justice system and human services and the detox professional. And they were all like, well-meaning people, big hearts, doing a great job, great service. But I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for the people who, I identified with, that opened up their home. And so if you look at all the services that F5 does, it's that first week of sobriety that I had. Someone let me into their house. Someone brought me to meetings. Someone helped me get a job. All people in recovery. Not typical stuff that you would find in the big book or the basic text of NA or anything like that. It doesn't say go out and help people find jobs, right? It says be of maximum benefit to all of God's kids, right? And that means that sometimes we help them find jobs, or sometimes we've even loaned them money. I'm not recommending it, but it says like sometimes we do. Sometimes we give them rides to meetings. Sometimes we pick them up from detox. Like, it does. Like, there's no absolute programming at F5. Sometimes it's just buying someone a phone. Like, it's really case by case. Nothing's off the table, unless it's drugs, right? But We've helped people pay their fines. We've helped them, money is a big deal. And if you eliminate some barriers for them, they can usually have enough wiggle room to start building some momentum. So that first week is F5, and it's been awesome watching people get their kids back. It's been awesome watching them get jobs they thought that were beyond them. It's been awesome watching them sponsor people, complete treatment, get involved, get in the center of their fellowship, and not fall off the ends. Like it's all led by people with lived experience of knowing what it's like to walk out of the jail and look out there and realize you have nowhere to go. Nowhere. You have no one to call. You couldn't even call them if you wanted because you don't have a phone. Like, it's humbling. And so our goal is that the first 72 hours out for every single person, all hands on deck. Whatever they need. Pizza, you help with a phone, you want to go buy some shoes, whatever it is, like, we'll make it as safe and convenient and empowering as possible in that first 72 hours. And then obviously, it's like once a week, house meetings, we'll try and empower people while we're giving them drug tests. It's just a different feel. It's a different vibe. It's kind of like the weird uncle instead of the very disciplined dad, or the punitive mom. It's like that weird uncle you saw at Thanksgiving and Christmas, and the only reason you want to go is because, your weird uncle's there and his kids. Like, that's F5. It's that last house on the block after all those really expensive houses that's really dimly lit, but there's a bunch of people with styrofoam cups drinking coffee and smoking cigarettes, and they're loud and obnoxious, and all the other neighbors are talking crap about them. And then you get there and they tell you they love you and they hug you and they want you to be around and keep coming back and all this stuff. And it doesn't look awesome, but it feels awesome compared to when I was in one of those nice houses and I just felt like I was not in the right place and surrounded by people who just really didn't care, So that's the bio, I guess.